Hello everybody, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror, and today I am giving my review of Renfield. So this is a movie that I was really looking forward to seeing. I remember when the first photos from set got leaked early last year, and we got to see photos of Nicolas Cage in his full-on Dracula outfit. And I was so excited to see those photos. He looked so cool as Dracula, and everyone that I knew was really excited about him taking on this role. And I remember saying to a friend at the time, like, Hollywood is finally giving us what we want. This is going to be awesome. Spoiler alert, it is not that awesome. This will be a spoiler review going forward, but what I will say beforehand is that I find this film to be very mediocre. Aggressively mediocre are the words that are coming to my mind. And basically what I mean by that is this is a film that is relying so heavily on common narrative tropes and common stereotypes. For example, you have Awkwafina, who is playing a police officer, and she has a father who was a police chief at one point who ended up getting killed in the line of duty. The cause of his death being corruption within the police force and the police working with certain criminals, right? And so she's the cop that has to live up to her father's legacy, and she stands for truth and justice and everything that is good in the world. And she has a sister that she has a troubled relationship with, but then over the course of the film, they end up forgiving each other and all is well with the world. There's also this mafia storyline, this weird crime family syndicate type thing that is also relying on stereotypes, right? You have the typical matriarch, the stereotype of the older woman who's actually the one that's the head of this crime family, and she's always fabulously dressed. And then she has this son who's kind of a goofball, but his storyline is very much trying to prove himself to his mother and proving that he can be the leader of this crime family, right? So you have righteous cop on the one hand that's trying to seek justice, and then on the other side you have crime family, and again, it's just things that we've seen before. And what's odd is that the film is not trying to give you anything new. Like, it really is just relying on these old stereotypes that we've seen again and again. And it honestly makes this film pretty tedious to watch because a lot of the narrative centers around these characters. You get very little of Nicolas Cage as Dracula in comparison, which is odd because it does feel like this film is kind of putting all of its poker chips on Nicolas Cage and his performance, but you don't see him enough. And even though he definitely is the highlight of this film, they're not doing a lot with the Dracula character. Like, a lot of the humor just felt very tired. Obviously, the character of Dracula has been in our pop culture for eons now, and he's been a figure in pop culture enough that there have already been a lot of parodies around Dracula and just the whole vampire lore. And it feels like this film is just kind of rehashing old jokes. Like, I'm pretty sure there's some jokes in here that Abbott and Costello were already doing in the late 1940s. And perhaps that was the intention here. Perhaps they were trying to pay homage to those films. But tonally, this film is just so all over the place, and unfortunately that makes the humor fall flat a lot of the time. This is a film that wants to be an action movie mixed in with a comedy, mixed in with police procedural, mixed in with crime and mafia storyline, and then wants to throw in a dash of B-movie horror. And all of these things just don't mesh well together. It all feels very awkwardly connected. And I think this is why they're relying so heavily on these narrative tropes that we're all familiar with. They're trying to throw too much into the pot at one time, and that means that there's not enough time to really flesh out one storyline. I personally was disappointed that there was very little of the B-movie horror aspect. At the beginning of the film, they give you background on Renfield and Dracula's relationship, and they actually recreate some scenes from the original Dracula film of the 1930s, the Bela Lugosi one. It looks cool. It looks like a lot of fun, and I wish they had kept that aesthetic, because again, the action and the comedy didn't quite mesh well with the portrayal of Dracula that Nicolas Cage was giving. They do try to bring the gore. It is a pretty bloody movie, although it's one of those films where a lot of the blood and guts looks like CGI. It may not be, but to me it definitely had that computer generated texture to it. The gore is very over the top as well. This is a film where you'll have someone like Renfield ripping a character apart and their blood and guts just explodes everywhere. To me, it did not do much, but if you are someone that's into gore effects, then you may like that aspect of the film. But again, I just don't feel like there's really enough here in terms of character and story to really recommend anyone go out and see this film in the theater, which makes me so disappointed to say, because again, this is Nicolas Cage as Dracula. This should have been amazing. To me, there was just a lot of lazy writing here, and I feel like Hollywood tries to do this sometimes where they'll just take certain archetypes, again, be it the cop or be it the mafia boss, and they just rely on the fact that as audience members, we are going to be coming into this film already aware of these type of archetypes. And so we come in knowing what to expect from these characters. And I feel like studios will just use these expectations that we have as audience members and our knowledge of these archetypes to just avoid doing any real kind of character development. This is a narrative that just wants to move from one set piece to the next. Like, everything in this film is just so surface level. They don't try to do any real digging deep into the characters or their psyches. There's this whole plot line with Awkwafina and her sister and how they have a troubled relationship, but you maybe get like 2 scenes with them. And then of course you have the scene where she has to save her sister from some sort of danger. But again, it just never feels like the stakes are that high. And it's like they set up at the beginning that she's grieving over her father, but then they never really go back to that by the end of the story or show really what her emotional journey was through that, or really kind of show what the lesson learned was. And when I say lesson learned, I don't mean to say that the film needs to be preachy and have some sort of after-school special message to it. I really just mean that there's no change or transformation in the character from where they start at the film and where they end. So yeah, overall, I found the writing to be really uninspired. There were interesting moments throughout. The highlight of the narrative is definitely the toxic relationship between Renfield and Dracula. You have a whole thing where Renfield is trying to go on this like self-help journey and seek therapy for the fact that he's in this very toxic codependent relationship with Dracula. And all of that was pretty funny and something new that we haven't seen before. And it was definitely tiptoeing around themes such as the notion of stepping into your personal power and like manifestation and using affirmations to make yourself feel better. So kind of playing with like the extreme self-help trends that you see on social media a lot of times, even stuff that you could categorize as being kind of new agey. And I wish the film had leaned into that a little bit more and really upped the humor there. One of the plot lines in this film is Dracula deciding that he wants to have world domination because it's something that he deserves. And again, playing with this idea of stepping into one's personal power and the notion that, yes, I deserve everything that I want. So I feel like the film could have really played with those themes and really used Dracula and his relationship with Renfield to explore how toxic this kind of extreme self-help, extreme new age thinking can actually be. I feel like the film could have made a really interesting commentary on the state of our culture within this framing of cheesy B-movie horror characters. The film is set in New Orleans, and I was also kind of bummed that they didn't utilize the setting and all of the lore of New Orleans. Like, I feel like there was potential there to really bring in other types of magic or other types of horror. And I've been thinking about that, especially in terms of the film's ending. I am going to be talking about the ending of the film here, so if you do not want to have that spoiled, skip ahead. I'll leave a timestamp for when to skip ahead to. So the ending has Renfield and Awkwafina's character, I forget her name, They kill and destroy Dracula, but not before taking some of his blood, because his blood has healing properties, and so they use the blood to heal her sister, who was fatally wounded. They use it to heal other characters that got killed along the way. And I thought from a storytelling perspective that that was an odd choice, because the entire film is Renfield talking about how toxic his dependency on Dracula is, and his journey is learning to rely on himself and finding, again, the power within him to break this relationship, to break this dependency. So to come to the end of the film and have the solution be to use Dracula's blood, like, it just felt odd, because it's like, okay, well, you're still relying on Dracula, even though your whole story is about you breaking away from him. At the end of the day, you still need him, and you're still relying on the resources that he provides. Whereas I feel like a stronger ending would have been Renfield finding something outside of Dracula, finding some other type of resource in order to help stop him and in order to heal all the damage that Dracula inflicts throughout the film. Like, I feel like that would have been more in line with the film's themes and more in line with Renfield's character development. And so that's why I'm saying I wish that they had utilized the city of New Orleans more. Because again, within the city of New Orleans, there are plenty of opportunities to find other magical solutions to help stop Dracula. Like, one of the ways that they stop Dracula is to trap him within a protection circle. And Awkwafina's character says something along the lines of like, oh yeah, I found the instructions for a protection circle on Wiccan Tumblr. And it's like, okay, yeah, cool, Wiccan Tumblr, that's cute, but also, you're in New Orleans. There's actual witches and witchcraft in New Orleans. Again, this may just be me wanting the film to have more horror elements into it, but I don't know, it felt like a missed opportunity to not utilize New Orleans more. Honestly, this whole film feels like one big missed opportunity, and I do wonder if this is because of some sort of studio interference. I say that because at the end of the film, when the credits start rolling, they start replaying scenes shown in the film. But I noticed that there were quite a few scenes in the credits that were not in the actual movie. Like, there's one shot in the credits where you see Renfield and he's surrounded by a bunch of dancers and it looks like he's singing and dancing. Like, it looks like they filmed this very elaborate choreographed dance sequence. And I'm sitting there watching this and I'm like, that scene wasn't anywhere in the film. Like, where did that come from? So it seemed like they filmed a bunch of extra stuff, a bunch of other scenes. And again, I don't know if this was the studio coming in and telling them to take certain things out. So I don't know. I would be really interested to see what the initial idea for this movie actually was. Because yeah, something just feels off about it. So those are my thoughts on Renfield. Again, this is not a movie that I would suggest you run out to the theater and see if you haven't already. I would say wait for this to come on streaming. I'm sure it'll be available on one of the streaming platforms within the next several weeks. If you have seen Renfield already, let me know what you thought. What did you think about it? Did you enjoy it more than I did? Let me know, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.